Yes, it is. Good evening. Tonight we're learning Maseches Pesachim Daf Kuf, and we're starting our travels through Arvei Pesachim, which is very halacha l'maisa. And our Mishnah yesterday on the top of Tzadi Testament Beis opened with a discussion of whether or not on Erev Pesach one is allowed to eat. So if you just look at the very top line of Tzadi Testament Beis, we're not doing a full reading Chazara. So the Mishnah opened to say that Samach Lemincha, you're not supposed to eat at all. And Rashi highlighted so that one would be able to eat the matzah shel mitzvah l'te'avon, that they should have a desire to eat the matzah shel mitzvah. Okay. And then we saw Brisa as the Gemara opened that seemed to say, hey, what about Shabbos and Yantiv? The Brisa writes the same thing, and we gave two answers. The second answer that we gave is halfway down on Tzadi Testament Beis, and that was the answer of Rav Papa. And he said that these two sources can both be Rav Yehuda, that in the Brisa by Arvei Shabbosos and Mincha, by Arvei Shabbos and Yantiv, that only mina mincha ulamala it's aser. That's when you're not allowed to eat on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yantiv. But samach lemincha shari. But within a half hour of mincha you are allowed to eat. However, he said that by Pesach, even samach lemincha you're not allowed. So asks the Gemara on this answer of Rav Papa that everything is within the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara as follows: Erev Shabbos samach lemincha shari. The way that you explained the difference between our Mishnah and the Brisa is to say that by Samach Lemincha, by Shabbos, that it is mutter to eat, and Samach Lemincha by Pesach that it's asur to eat, and that really there was no machlokas within our Mishnah, within the Brisa of Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. So the problem is that, says the Gemara, that doesn't work because v'hatanya, 5 lines from the bottom, Tzadi Testament Beis, the Brisa writes, Lo yochal adam ba'arbe Shabbos yomim tovim mitesha shosu l'mala. So he says that you're not allowed to eat on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yantiv from 9 hours. Now, Mincha Ktana is at what time? It's 9.5 hours into the day. So this Brisa says that from 9 hours, that is what, aka Samach Lemincha. So therefore, what we see from here is that Samach Lemincha, one is also not allowed to eat on Erev Shabbos because this Brisa says so expressly. Well, maybe not quite expressly. It calls it 9 hours instead of calling it Samach Lemincha, but it's an equivalent to that amount of time. So it seems to be a steer within Rabbi Yehuda. Let's just finish the Brisa. Rabbi Yossi Omer Ochel v'holechat shetech, and he is the more lenient opinion, as we saw in the Brisa yesterday as well. So that's the Gemara's question. How can Rav Papa assume that everything is Rabbi Yehuda if Rabbi Yehuda himself in another Mishnah says that Samach Lemincha by Shabbos should be Asur? That doesn't work. So the Gemara answers on the very bottom line of Tzadi Testament Beis, well, maybe the Brisa isn't a good Brisa. Amar Mar Zutra, man lema lan de mitaratztahi, who says that it's such a good Brisa? Turning to the top of Daf Kuf Amud Aleph, Dilma mishabeshtahi. Maybe the Brisa is really a mistake. Take a look at the top Rashi on the page. Rashi dibur hamaschel mishabeshtahi v'hachi ibayle lemisnei v'tesha shaus umechza va'elach. Maybe there was a missing word. Maybe really the Brisa that you think is a problem for Rabbi Yehuda isn't a problem at all, because that Brisa indicates that it should have been at 9.5 hours. It said 9, it was a typo. So says the Gemara, we cannot accept that answer. This Brisa is in fact accurate, and our question stands. How do we know that this is true? Because says the Gemara, Amar le Meremar, v'itema Rav Yemar, Meremar or Rav Yemar said, Ana iklai lepirke de Rav Pinchas b'rei de Rav Ami. I went to the shiur, lepirke to the shiur of Rav Pinchas, the son of Rav Ami, the katana v'tani kameh, become Tana v'tani kameh, and then someone got up and they quoted a Mishnah. V'kibla mineh, he quoted this Mishnah of 9 hours, that on Erev Shabbos you're not allowed to eat from the 9th hour, which is, again, what we call Samach Lemincha. So if that's true, says the Gemara, this Brisa has been verified. And if the Brisa has been verified, then we're back to our question, which is, hey, wait a minute, ihachi kashya, then we're back to our question, which is, how can Rabbi Yehuda in the Brisa say that Samach Lemincha on Erev Shabbos is mutter, but in the Brisa at the end of the page on Tzadi Testament Beis says Samach Lemincha by the 9th hour, that it's asur? So that question stands. Says the Gemara, Ella, therefore, machvarta kid Rav Huna. Therefore, says the Gemara, we reject the answer of Rav Papa, the second answer that was presented yesterday that we reviewed today, which was 2/3 of the way down on Tzadi Testament Beis. We reject Rav Papa's answer, and machvarta kid Rav Huna, we go back to Rav Huna's answer. What was Rav Huna's answer? Rav Huna's answer, as we saw yesterday, is that we only needed our Mishnah for the sake of Rav Yossi. Because Rav Yossi was of the opinion that by Erev Shabbos it's ad shetechshach, but by Erev Pesach, even by Erev Pesach, Rav Yossi would agree that even from Samach Lemincha it would be Aser, and that is the answer that the Gemara sticks with, at least for now. Says the Gemara, Kuf Amud Aleph, about 5 lines down. Ulu Rav Huna minicha, does this really work for Rav Huna? The answer that really we're just trying to answer for Rav Yossi, how does that work out? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, V'itema Amar Rabbi Yabo, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Bar Reb Chanina, someone, an early Amora, made the following statement: Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda be'erev Pesach, be'erev HaPesach, ve'halacha ki Rabbi Yossi be'erev Shabbos. This is a statement of Rabbi Yochanan or Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina. It's a halachic statement that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to erev Pesach. Well, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi by erev Shabbos, but that doesn't work. Because what was the whole answer that we gave as to our Mishnah as it relates to the first brisa quoted in the Gemara? The Gemara says the brisa that we quoted in the Gemara is it's Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi by Erev Shabbos says ad shetechshach. So why did our Mishnah have to say something? Because we had to make sure that we knew that we paskin like Rav Yossi by Erev Shabbos, but everyone agrees when it comes to Pesach that Samach Lemincha. That's what Rav Huna answered. But says the Gemara, if you say that halacha is Rabbi Yehuda, almost a third of the way down, then if you say that halacha is Rabbi Yehuda be'erev Pesach, what does that imply? Michlal depalig Rabbi Yossi betarvaihu. See, the way that Rav Huna gave his answer on Tzadi Testimud Beis about the conflict between our Mishnah and the first brisa quoted in the Gemara was to say that really Rav Yossi, we had to make sure we didn't make an error. And Rav Yossi was very lenient by Erev Shabbos, but he agrees even to Rabbi Yehuda that on Erev Pesach that it's asur to eat samach lemencha ulamala. You're not allowed to eat at that point. So, but this statement of Rabbi Yochanan implies not that way. The statement of Rabbi Yochanan implies that Rabbi Yossi doesn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda even by Erev Pesach. He seems to argue there as well. So that's a big problem. If that's the case, then we have a misunderstanding of the Shita of Rav Huna. Answers the Gemara, lo, you are incorrect. When Rav Yochanan said, or Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda be'erev Pesach, lo, halacha mechalal de pligi, what is that talking about? Behafsaka, about stopping your meal once you've started beheter. That's what he says. That's what Rabbi Yochanan is talking about. That's where he argues. But by starting the meal, of course he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, just like Rav Huna answered. So with this word behafsaka, here's what we would have learned. Rav Huna's answer is correct. The reason why we have our Mishnah and the Brisa is to indicate to us that while Rav Yossi is lenient by Erev Shabbos and you can eat up until dark, he is not lenient when it comes to Erev Pesach. He and Rav Yehuda would agree that like our Mishnah, Erev Pesachim, Samach lemincha lo yochal adam ad shetechshach, he agrees. But Rav Yochanan, who quotes that there is a machlokes still by Erev Pesach, it's not about the starting time. There they agree to our Mishnah that by Erev Pesach, that's when the Isser kicks in by Samach Lemincha. Where do they argue? About the need to stop the meal. What does that mean? The Brisa writes, 1/3 of the way down, a little bit more, Kuf Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Detanya, Mafsikin l'Shabbosos, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Omer ein mafsikin. That when it comes to Friday going into Shabbos, so the halacha is in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, you have to stop your meal. You're not allowed to just continue into dark. You have to stop your meal. Rabbi Yossi Omer ein mafsikin. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you can just plow through, no problem at all. So this brisa is very clearly talking about being mafsik. That's very clear. Umaisa, this is all part of the brisa still, crazy story, requires analysis, fascinating story. Umaisa b'Reb Shimon ben Gamliel v'Reb Yehuda v'Reb Yossi shayim mesubin ba'ako. Seemingly Rabbi Yehuda was in the room, which makes the following story very difficult. V'kidei shalei hayom. The day was progressing on an Erev Shabbos and it became Shabbos, or it was about to become Shabbos. Amar le Reb Shimon ben Gamliel l'Reb Yossi. He refers to him as Berebi. What does Berebi mean? Let's learn our first Rashbam in the Masechta and in Shas. This Rashbam in the where Rashi typically is. This is the bottom of that page, and about 15 lines into the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down, there's a Rashbam Dibur Hamaschel Berebi. Kach Karu Rashbag the Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta. This is how he referred to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta, Klomar Gadol Hador. It was a phrase of Gadol Hador that indicates that he was a great person. So Berebi was a term of endearment, a term of kavod. Back in the Gemara, halfway down, Amar le Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Rabbi Yossi Berebi, the Gadol Hador, you're the great one. Ritzoncha nafsik v'nechush l'divi Rabbi Yehuda chaverenu. Do you think that we should try now on this Erev Shabbos to be makbid like the person who's sitting next to us? How awkward of a conversation. Rabbi Yossi was a gadol hador. Rabbi Yehuda is sitting in the same room. Rabbi Yossi says you don't have to stop your meal. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to stop your meal. Rashbag makes it all kinds of awkward. He's like, hey, do you want to follow this guy right sitting next to us that he was so machmir? Do you want to follow him? So says the Gemara, Amar lo Reb Shimon ben Gamliel gets a sharp response from the gadol hador. Rabbi Yossi says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel as follows. Amar lo, b'chol yom vayom ata mechabev devarai lifnei Rabbi Yehuda. Every day of the week, in general, you always follow my Pesachim, says Rabbi Yossi, me over Rabbi Yehuda. And today, and now you want to say that you prefer the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? Hagam lichbosh es hamalka imi babois. I've got Rabbi Yehuda sitting with me right here in the room. You're gonna go with his shita instead of mine. We just finished Purim. This is the line that we read when Haman fell on Esther's bed. You're gonna steal the queen with me in the house. So this story is a little bit uncomfortable. So how does Reb Shimon ben Gamliel squirm out of this story? He answers 6-7 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar le im kain lo nafsik your taka, right? We should not stop the meal. Shema yiru talmidim v'yikbu halacha ledoros. Maybe the students will see that we've stopped, like Rabbi Yehuda, which would have been incorrect. V'yikbu halacha ledoros, and they would then make a mistake. They would erroneously think that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda and not like Rabbi Yossi. And then the Gemara concludes in the Brisa, Amru lo zazu misham ad shekavu halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. Then they made no more debates anymore. Rabbi Yossi, anybody else? Then everybody agreed that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, and Ladina, we have no obligation to stop eating as we go from Friday into Shabbos. So we know that on Purim this past week, we did stop. Why did we stop? Because what? Well, you'll see in a moment. We have to follow a particular set of halachos, and we have some copies which you guys can grab in a minute because we'll be discussing some of the halachos therein. Because we don't paskin like either of these shitas. Says the Gemara at the 2 dots, 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Ein halacha. Lo ke Rabbi Yehuda v'lo ke Rabbi Yossi. We don't paskin like either of them. We don't paskin that you should be mafsik, and we don't paskin that you should not be mafsik. How many options are there? either stop or don't stop. But what is the third option? So says the Gemara, Ella pores mapa umekadesh. You should put out a napkin, a tablecloth, or something. We'll see in Rashi what's going on here. And pores mapa umekadesh, and one should then make sure that they cover the table and they make kiddush. So it's kind of like a blend. You kind of stop eating your meal. You get a cup of wine. You say, and then you're done. Take a look at the last Rashi, not the bottom, not the Rashbam, but on the top section of Rashi, the last of those of that section, Elapores mapa al hashulchan umekadesh hayom v'chozer v'ochel. So we have a pause button. This is the compromise answer that is given by Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. And this is unlike, as we saw earlier on the page, the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So of Rabbi Yochanan, actually, sorry. So that's what the Gemara says here, is that we don't follow Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yehuda. We follow the halacha of Pores Mapa Umekadesh. We'll look at this in a moment inside the Shulchan Aruch. I'll screen share with you, and we have copies here for those who need. But let's first finish this sugya. Eini, is that true that we say Pores Mapa Umekadesh? But after all, we have a Mari Makom that seems to indicate that that's not the way we behave. What's that Mari Makom? The Amar Rav Tachlifa Bar Avdimi. Rav Tachlifa Bar Avdimi said, Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel himself, Shmuel against Shmuel. Shmuel first told us, Pores Mapa Mekadesh, that you interrupt your meal not fully, but you interrupt it enough to make kiddush, and then you can continue. And what does this Shmuel say? Kishem shemafsikin the kiddush, turning to the top of Daf Kuf Amud Beis, kach mafsikin lahavdalah. The same would then be true as it relates to Havdalah. My mafsikin, what did it mean then when we said mafsikin? Lav le'akira shulchan. Doesn't it mean there that you're supposed to remove the table in its entirety? Remember, they didn't eat like us. The equivalent of those folding TV dinner stands. That's, again, in concept, something kind of like what they had. We have these, nice, long, big, heavy tables. That's not what they had. So the Gemara has a havamina that maybe when Shmuel says this din, that kishem shemafsikin lekiddush kach mafsikin leavdala, that maybe it means akira shulchan, and then therefore it's a stira within Shmuel. This Shmuel means akira shulchan when we say mafsik. But the one we were talking about when it said poris mapa makadesh, that mafsik meant that you have to cover the table. It doesn't mean you have to remove the table. So that's a stira within Shmuel. So answers the Gemara, no, lo lemapa. And he says, no, that's not the case. And in fact, what we mean is that you're supposed to cover. So everyone can feel free to grab a copy of the Shulchan Aruch. It's on that middle table there. I will share with you here on the screen a copy of the Shulchan Aruch. So this is the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Reish Ayin Aleph. Reish Ayin Aleph is known as the Siman in Shulchan Aruch about Kiddush. And if you look at and the second line circled is Seif Dalet. So Reish Ayin Aleph, Seif Dalet. Writes the Shulchan Aruch as follows. Once the time of Kiddush has hit, the halacha is Aser litom klum kodem sheyikadesh afilu mayim. Once the time has hit to make Kiddush, you are not allowed to have anything at all to eat or to drink, even water. So it says the Gemara. Says the Mishnah Brura. If you look at the very bottom of the right column of the Mishnah Brura, I circled Yadala. Look right above it for a second. Afilu mayim. V'shari lirchotz pib b'mayim. You're allowed to rinse out your mouth. It's not like a fast day. You can rinse out your mouth. Because there we're only concerned about te'ima. So the te'ima is not a big deal. That's fine if you end up doing that. Anyways, the Shulchan Aruch continues back up to the top. Aser litom klum kodem sheikadesh afilu mayim. And here's where we come into play. And even if you started during the day, and Rashi points out, so used to learning Gemara, we need to learn more halacha. So the Mishnah Brura here writes in Sif Katan Yodalid, Tzarech lahafsik, ve'afal gav dehischil beheter. Even if you all started properly, no problem at all, shiny hacha, dehakidush shayach l'seuda. The kiddush is going to be necessary to enable the Seuda. We'll get to this in a little bit, called Kiddush b'makom Seuda. U'lechatchila, and the way that the halacha was set up of making Kiddush, itkun sheyikadesh kodem Seuda, u'v'makom Seuda, that you should first make Kiddush before the Seuda. That's why we can't eat, and it should be b'makom Seuda, called Ein Kiddush ela b'makom Seuda. So this is Ladina, every Friday night. A person who goes to, once you're in shul, and once it's shkia, and once you've davened, the halacha is that you're not allowed to eat or drink anything. You come home, you want to grab a potato, not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to eat, even if it's water, you're not allowed to eat. Okay, if you have to take medication, fine. Okay, there's reasonable kulas, but in general, we do try very hard not to eat on Shabbos prior to hearing Kiddush. This is true Shabbos day also, that one is not allowed to eat prior to Kiddush. So you walk into a Kiddush, a piece of beef jerky, whatever it is, some herring, also, you're not allowed to eat until you hear Kiddush. So the shaila comes up in the poskim. What about eating before davening, where the chiyuv of Kiddush hasn't really started yet on Shabbos morning? That's a great shaila, and the Shulchan Aruch elsewhere speaks about this, and it's quoted in the Meforshim as lo sochlu al adam, that a person should not eat before davening because they haven't yet davened for their dam, for their neshama, for their life. So one should try not to eat before davening. But if in fact one has a need to eat, so let's say a person's taking a medication that requires food, fine, eat. But then you have to make Kiddush before davening. Rav Moshe Feinstein has tshuvas on this, has a tshuva on this. So one should make sure that if in fact they have to make Kiddush at an earlier time, that if they have to eat beforehand, before davening, they actually still have to make Kiddush. So that's the din here in Shulchan Aruch. Let's just finish up this Seif Dalet. If for whatever reason you're drinking wine, but it's not for the sake of making Kiddush, then you don't say the whole Kiddush. You just say Borei Priya Gofen. Okay, fine. This is another din.
In this situation, I mean, maybe it's kind of like the past week, you're drinking wine at 4:30 p.m. and you make a Borei Priya Gofen.
Borei Priya Gofen, yeah.
And then you started.
Right.
But that's not Kiddush for the meal.
Right. Then you would cover the table. The Meforshim here point out you're actually
outside.
The Meforshim here point out that you actually have to cover the chalas. That's what we're talking about here.
Right.
Then you make a full Kiddush.
If it's for Shabbos, though.
For Shabbos.
But if it's not for Shabbos, you're drinking wine.
Well, then you're not. But that's not Kiddush b'makom Suda.
No, yeah, but it's saying right here. Why would you make a Gofen before without it being sanctified in the meal? Just because
you're thirsty.
Right. So
it's a drink you grabbed.
You're allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that. He's saying that if it, in fact, it happens, if you do take a drink when you shouldn't, then you should make a regular Borei Priya Gofen, but it doesn't count as your Kiddush. Yeah. This shaila comes up when you do a bris on Shabbos. So typically speaking, the poskim say that after, and at this Shabbos, I did a bris, and I said to Rabbi Gelman, and I realized there was no Kiddush in the back room. I it's for sure there was no Kiddush there. Many shuls don't have Kiddush still. So I said to Rabbi Gelman, oh, do you want to announce that when the Mavarech says Borei Pri Hagafen, that it counts for Kiddush? And then I'm like, oh, wait, there's no food. But that is the din. And we've said this here before, that if you do a bris here, and if you do a bris anywhere, then there's food to follow. So you announce to the room that the bracha of Borei Pri Hagafen that the Mavarech is going to make is going to count for Kiddush on Shabbos. You don't say V'shamru and Ochanami, but it counts as Kiddush. That's Shabbos. It's a little bit of a different application. Okay, so that's what the Gemara says over here. This is the sheet of Shmuel, that we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. We don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. We paskin like neither of them seemingly, and we don't have a Tana yet to reflect this shita, but we do Pores Mapu Makadesh, where we cover the table and we make Kiddush. Good. So let's continue now with just a brief story and a brisa. Rabba bar Rav Huna ikla lebe Reish Kalusa. We're on the top of Kuf Mid Beis, second line. Rabba bar Rav Huna went to the home of the Reish Kalusa of the Exilarch. Aisu taka kame. They brought a tray or a small table in front of him, and what did he do? Paras mapo v'kidesh. He did what he was supposed to do because he learned the din. That's what you're supposed to do. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Brisa writes, "V'shavin shein bevinas hashulchan ela im kein kiddush," that the table can only be brought in if you make kiddush ve'im hevi. And once they bring the table, what should you do? Paras mapo makadesh. That this is the din, that one should make sure that they're covering the table in order to make kiddush. So again, if you're eating all the way through Friday, like many did this past Friday, so the halacha is that you need to stop, cover the table with chalas, make kiddush, and then continue your meal. That's fine. You have to get daven also. I'm just saying we're ignoring that for the moment in this halachic flow because we're just talking about the meal. Fine. Says the Gemara, two conflicting brises. Tani chada shavin shein maschilin. According to one brisa, the Tanaim, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda were shavin. They agreed shein maschilin, that you should not start. We don't know yet what we're talking about. The Tanya Idach, another brisa reads shavin shemaschilin, that they agree that you should start. I understand the brisa that indicates that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda agree with one another that you should not start eating. When would that be? Mishkachas l'be'er Pesach. That's our Mishnah, Tzadi Testamud Beis, at the top, right at the beginning of the parak. But according to the brisa that indicates that they both hold, that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that maschilin, that you should start eating. What is that circumstance? You name of Erev Shabbos, a miflag pligi. We already saw that if it comes to Shabbos, that's the first brisa we saw in the Gemara. They disagree with one another on that one. They don't say that you're allowed to start. That's not correct. So then Lokasha says the Gemara, kan kodem teisha, kan la'achar teisha. Depends. One is talking about, there's no machlokas between these two braisos. One is talking about before the 9th hour, before samach lemincha, where one shita would be lenient, and then where everyone would agree to be lenient, and the other would say that one's after the 9th hour, where everyone would agree that you are not supposed to that you're not supposed to eat, and that would be after the 9th hour, which is in the category of samach lemincha. Osam b'nei adam shekichu b'veis hakneses. Many shuls when I was growing up, all the shuls that I davened in, I remember growing up and we used to daven Friday nights at Yeshurun, Rabbi Cohen's in the other building before they moved. So in that building, I remember they used to always make kiddush and no one would eat anything and everyone would go home. But what about kiddush b'makom suda? So we're going to get a little bit into that. So again, now we'll pick up much more heavily tomorrow. Says the Gemara, those people who make kiddush in the Beis HaKnesses says, Amar Rav and Shmuel have a machlokes. Rav says, Yad yayin lo yatsu, lo yatsu, yedei kiddush yatsu. Rav says, you were Yotze Kiddush, but you are not Yotze the Borei Pri Hagafen. And Rashi and the Rashban, you could take your pick. They both say approximately the same thing. Rashi says a drop shorter. So look at Rashi. The last of the Rashi is on this Amud, at the top section of the page. That if they go home and they have wine to drink in their homes, they heard the Borei Pri Hagafen in Shul. They went home. They of course have to make a new bracha. That's called akiras makom. This is a big lashon that's important in regards to hilchos brachos. What if there's akiras makom? You made a shehakol over here. You went to another room in your house. Do you drink it? Do you not drink it? Okay. So here, the Rav was of the opinion that if someone makes kiddush in Shul, it doesn't help you as it relates to drinking wine in your home. However, you are yosei the mitzvah d'oraisa of kiddush. That's important. The mitzvah d'oraisa is a big deal because we know that the actual drinking of the wine is not a requirement. V'haraya that when Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, you can still be Yotze Kiddush. You say Vaychulu with intent. That's one way to be Yotze. Ushmuel Amar, that when a person makes Kiddush in the Beis HaKnesses, says, Afidei Kiddush lo yatsu, nothing at all. You were Yotze nothing. Let's analyze just for a moment, and then we will pause for the night. Says the Gemara, top of Daf Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph Ela L'Rav, according to Rav, who said that you are not Yotze the bracha borei priagafen for the wine, but you were Yotze the mitzvah dorais of Kiddush, Ela L'Rav, Lama le lekidushe bevese. If in fact you were already Yotze Kiddush and Shul, why bother doing it again? You were Yotze already. You don't have to drink wine. That's not le'ikuva. So that's your Yotze the mitzvah either way. So why does Rav say that when you get home you have to repeat it? Says the Gemara, kadei lahotzi bana vuvnei veso, practical issue. Your wife and your children, they haven't heard Kiddush yet. You should help them. You should make Kiddush for them. Ushmuel, according to Shmuel, who said that you weren't Yotze anything. You weren't Yotze borei priagafen, because you went home. You weren't Yotze Kiddush because, as we'll see in a moment, it wasn't Kiddush b'makom suda. So Shmuel, lama le likdushe b'vei kanishta. Why then do we even allow for people to make Kiddush in a shul? What's the point? Nobody's eating. Everybody's going home. Says the Gemara, back in the day, that wasn't true. La'afuke orchem yedecho vasan, to help those who are guests to fulfill their obligations, because back in the day, the shul kind of had a dual function of like a hostel. That's where poor people would stay. To achlu, they would eat there. V'shasu, they would drink there. V'ganu, they would sleep there. V'vei kanishta, it was basically the home away from home, and that's where they would taka eat. So they made kiddush. Ve'azda Shmuel l'taimei. This is really bleeding into tomorrow, and with this we'll stop. Ve'azda Shmuel l'taimei to Amar Shmuel ein kiddush ella b'makom seuda. That when we make kiddush, it needs to be b'makom seuda. What do all of those words mean? Each of them have an important level of understanding that we will dig into tomorrow. Let's stop right here. We'll pick up tomorrow in Yirtzeh Hashem with Daf Kuf Aleph in Pesachim. Wishing you all a beautiful night.